I think you know he is not fit in the NHL.
Wake up to reality.
There's a break out in front, they score.
Glove save, Fleury!
Have you ever seen a player so small that you thought there's no way he can survive in the NHL? And then he not only survives, but dominates? That was Theo Fleury. 5'6", barely 150 pounds, yet he played like a giant, a fireball on skates. He had the speed, the skill, and the heart that could lift an entire arena to its feet.
Last Saturday night, Theo Fleury's sensational debut for the Giants produced a personal tally of 3 goals and 4 assists.
Fans loved him, opponents hated him, and every shift he took felt like something unpredictable was about to happen. But here's the thing, while Fleury was electrifying crowds with highlight reel goals and fearless plays, his life off the ice was completely different. Behind the superstar image was a man carrying battles no one could see. Scouts laughed at him, the league doubted him, and still, he built a career worthy of the Hall of Fame.
This is the greatest day of my life, greatest day for my family.
Yet when the games ended, he faced demons that were far bigger than anything on the rink. So the question is, how does someone so small, so overlooked, rise to the very top of hockey? And why did that same fire that made him unstoppable on the ice nearly destroy him away from it? This is the incredible story of Theo Fleury, a player who became a legend.
And it's a win for the Wild!
But also a man fighting to break free from the ghosts of his past. Theo Fleury came into this world on the 29th of June 1968 in the quiet prairie town of Oxbow, Saskatchewan. But his childhood was anything but quiet. Theo himself has said that from the time he was very young, his life was shaped by fear and instability. His father was an alcoholic, his mother was hooked on prescription pills, and the home he grew up in was pure chaos. For most kids, the parents are the ones keeping things together. For Theo, it was the opposite.
Yeah, my life has been quite interesting. Kind of some adversity in my life.
He often felt like the most mature person in the house. Always small for his age, Theo didn't have much control over his world at home, but he did have hockey. The rink gave him a place to escape, to push back against everything going wrong around him. In the small town of Russell, Saskatchewan, his talent was so obvious that neighbors and friends pitched in money just to help him chase his dream. That community support sent him to the well-known Andy Murray Hockey School in Brandon, Manitoba. That's where Theo's path crossed with a man who would change his life in ways he never expected: Graham James. At the time, James was a scout for the Winnipeg Warriors in the Western Hockey League. He told Theo, who was barely 5'2" and maybe 120 pounds, that he had the skill to make it in the NHL. For a boy who had been doubted his entire life, those words felt like a lifeline. James promised to guide him into junior hockey and eventually help him make the big leagues. Soon, James convinced Theo's parents to let their 4-year-old son move in with him in Winnipeg, saying he'd act as Theo's caretaker. On the surface, it looked like a great opportunity, but in reality, it became something far darker. Years later, Theo revealed that over a 2.5-year period, James sexually abused him more than 150 times. The trauma left scars that would last decades. Theo said he didn't sleep for 27 years because every time he closed his eyes, he felt trapped back in that same dark room, waiting for the nightmare to happen again. Despite all of this, hockey pressed forward. In 1983-84, at just 15 years old, Theo began his junior career with the Street James Canadians of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. A year later, he moved to the Moose Jaw Warriors, now coached by James himself. Alone, confused, and unable to speak about what was happening, Theo turned to alcohol for comfort. By 16, drinking had already become something he relied on daily. He would later admit, "It became something I couldn't live without, like oxygen or hockey." When James eventually left Moose Jaw and went back to Winnipeg, Theo finally got some distance from his abuser. His game started to soar. Though still only 5'6" and around 150 pounds, he kept improving every season in the WHL. His final year, 1987-88, was a breakout. He scored 68 goals and added 92 assists, tying for the league scoring title with none other than Joe Sakic. And he didn't just score, he played with fire, racking up 235 penalty minutes, showing he wasn't afraid to mix it up with anyone. That same year, though, his life off the ice became even more complicated. At just 19 years old, Theo became a father when his high school girlfriend Shannon gave birth to their son. Moose Jaw honored him at his final home game with a special tribute night, later retiring his number 9 jersey. Today, it still hangs in the rafters at Mosaic Place. But even in that moment of celebration, Theo often wondered how many people in the crowd already knew what Graham James had done to him and stayed silent. Internationally, Theo wore the maple leaf with pride. He represented Canada twice at the World Junior Championships, most famously in 1987 during the punch-up in Piestany. On the 4th of January of that year, Canada and the Soviet Union got into one of the wildest bench-clearing brawls hockey has ever seen. Both teams were thrown out of the tournament in disgrace. But a year later, Theo had his redemption captaining Team Canada to a gold medal. Still, despite all of his success in junior, New Hampshire L Scouts didn't believe in him. In the 1986 NHL draft, Theo wasn't picked in any of the 12 rounds. To general managers and scouts, he was just too small, not worth the gamble. But 1 year later, everything changed. Calgary Flames scout Ian McKenzie believes he could make it. Against protests from other scouts, GM Cliff Fletcher selected Fleury in the 8th round, 166th overall in the 1987 NHL draft. Not everyone in Calgary was happy. Chief scout Al McNeil was so furious, he threw his pen across the draft table and yelled, "We just drafted an effing jockey!" At the next table, Philadelphia Flyers assistant GM Gary Darling laughed out loud when he heard Theo's name. But that laughter didn't last long. At Calgary's 1,987 training camp, Theo showed up and shocked everyone. He wasn't just holding his own against NHL veterans, he was embarrassing them. He skated circles around established players, hit harder than anyone expected, and brought a relentless energy the Flames couldn't ignore. He may have been the smallest guy on the ice, but he played like a wrecking ball. After camp, he returned to Moose Jaw to finish his final junior season. But by that point, there was no doubt Theo Fleury was on the path to the NHL. In 1988, Theo Fleury signed his very first professional contract worth $415,000 with the Calgary Flames organization. He was sent to their IHL affiliate, the Salt Lake Golden Eagles, where he wasted no time showing his potential. In just 2 regular season games, he put up 7 points, then added 16 more in 8 playoff games, helping the Eagles capture the Turner Cup championship. But when he showed up at Calgary's training camp that fall, it wasn't the same story. Fleury arrived 20 pounds overweight, and the Flames weren't impressed. They sent him back down to Salt Lake to start the 1988-89 season. Theo wasn't happy about it, but instead of sulking, he dominated 37 goals and 37 assists in only 40 games. His numbers forced Calgary's hand. On the 1st of January, 1,989, with the Flames struggling, they called him up. Theo stepped into the NHL like he belonged there. In 36 games, he racked up 34 points as a rookie, playing on a line with tough guys Tim Hunter and Brian McClellan. And in the playoffs, he added another 11 points as the Flames stormed all the way to their first ever Stanley Cup. For Theo, it was a dream come true. He later said, "Greatest day of my life, greatest day for my family. I love everybody in Canada. This is the greatest feeling. We're number one, and nobody can take that away from us." From that moment, Theo Fleury wasn't just a player, he was an instant fan favorite. Calgary fans loved watching this undersized fireball fly around the Saddledome ice, hitting everything in sight, scoring big goals, and playing with a chip on his shoulder. Off the ice, life was changing just as quickly. Theo had money, fame, and attention, and he admits he took full advantage. As he put it, "Money, fame, and chicks, I made the most of it. What was I going to do? Slow down? Stay home and watch television every night? Forget it." On the ice, he just kept climbing. In his first full season in 1980-90, he scored 33 goals. But his real breakout came in 1990-91 when he exploded for 51 goals and 104 points. He earned a trip to the NHL All-Star Game, skating on a line with Doug Gilmour, and finished the year tied for the league lead in plus-minus at +48. That season also gave Calgary fans one of their most unforgettable moments. On the 26th of March 1991, Theo scored his 50th goal of the season even though he was playing with torn knee ligaments. He could barely walk, but insisted on dressing, then went out and scored a hat trick. When that 50th goal went in, the Saddledome crowd erupted, and the ovation seemed endless. His knee injury lingered into the playoffs, but Theo still delivered. In Game 6 of the first round against the Oilers, he scored one of the most iconic goals in Flames history. In overtime, Fleury stripped the puck, raced down the ice, and buried the winner before sliding across the Edmonton ice in celebration. Years later, Theo admitted, "I actually said to myself that shift, I was going to score, and then I did." What a feeling. By the fall of 1991, he was representing Canada again, this time at the Canada Cup, before starting another strong season with Calgary. He had 25 goals by Christmas. But then came the trade that changed everything. When Doug Gilmour was dealt away in January 1992, the Flames began to spiral, and so did Fleury. The championship window was closed, and the weight of carrying the team fell on his shoulders. For the next 8 years, Theo was the heart of the Flames. He posted 2 more 100-point seasons, made 5 more All-Star appearances, and became the franchise's most popular player by a mile. By the time his run in Calgary ended, he had 830 points in 791 games, numbers that put him among the elite. But even as his career soared, the storm inside him never stopped. His anger, fueled by everything he had endured, defined his style. As Theo put it himself, "That edge, that's the only thing that set me apart from every other little guy that tried to play in the NHL." In 1994, during the NHL lockout, Theo went overseas to Finland. Fans there loved him instantly, his energy, his fire, his personality. But when the lockout ended and he returned to Calgary, something unexpected happened. He got a phone call from Graham James. James, the very man who had abused him as a teenager, was putting together an ownership group for a new WHL team in Calgary. He wanted Theo involved, along with names like Brett the Hitman, Hart, Joe Sakic, and Anders Hedberg. Despite everything, Theo agreed, becoming the first investor with $125,000. That team would become the Calgary Hitmen. Years later, when Theo publicly revealed the full extent of James's crimes in 2009, some criticized him for ever working with James again. Montreal Gazette columnist Pat Hickey even accused him of enabling abuse by putting other kids at risk. Theo later explained it as something like Stockholm Syndrome. "It's weird how it all happened. You can still feel some sense of loyalty towards somebody. That's the hold he had on me." By 1995, Theo's relationship with the Flames had become complicated. He briefly held out in training camp before signing a 5-year, $12 million contract. That season, he was also diagnosed with Crohn's disease, a painful and exhausting condition that caused him serious health struggles. Still, he fought through it, scoring 96 points and wearing the captain's C for a rebuilding Calgary team. But that same year, his world was shaken again. His close friend Sheldon Kennedy came forward and pressed charges against Graham James, revealing that he too had been abused as a teenager. Kennedy didn't name the other victim, but rumors swirled that it was Theo. James was fired from his role with the Hitmen and eventually convicted and sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. The pressure on Theo only grew as the media continued to hound him about Sheldon Kennedy's case, pressing him daily with questions about whether he was the unnamed victim. Carrying that dark secret became unbearable, and instead of confronting it, Theo sank deeper into destructive habits. Yet on the ice, he still managed to shine. On the 29th of November 1997, Fleury scored his 315th career goal, passing Joe Nieuwendyk to become Calgary's all-time leader. That very same day, he received word that he had been named to Team Canada's roster for the 1998 Winter Olympics in Nagano. For a kid from Oxbow, Saskatchewan, representing his country on the Olympic stage was a dream come true, but reality hit hard. Theo stayed clean leading up to the games, and for the first time, he noticed his play wasn't the same. As he later admitted, years of relying on alcohol couldn't just be switched off overnight without consequences. Canada left Nagano without a medal, and for Theo, it was a bitter disappointment. Back in Calgary, he kept putting up numbers. On the 19th of February 1999, he passed Al MacInnis with his 823rd point, becoming the Flames' all-time scoring leader, a record that stood until Jarome Iginla broke it a decade later. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. The Flames were struggling financially, and despite offering him $16 million over 4 years, Theo turned it down. He wanted more security, and Calgary simply couldn't afford it. On the 28th of February, 1999, the unthinkable happened. Theo Fleury was traded to the Colorado Avalanche. For Calgary fans, it felt like a punch to the gut. Fleury had been their heart and soul for more than a decade. But in Colorado, he showed exactly why contenders wanted him. In just 15 regular season games, he racked up 24 points, then added another 17 inches the playoffs. He helped the AVs push deep, but their run ended in the Western Conference Finals against the Dallas Stars. To everyone's surprise, Colorado decided not to re-sign him that summer. Instead, Theo landed one of the richest contracts of his career, a 3-year, $21 million deal with the New York Rangers, with an option for a 4th year at $7 million. It should have been the start of a new chapter, but New York proved to be the worst place possible for someone battling personal demons. Life in Manhattan came with pressure, temptations, and endless distractions. In his first season with the Rangers, Theo managed only 15 goals, a far cry from his Calgary numbers. He admitted to becoming obsessed with New York's nightlife, especially strip clubs, which he described as one-stop shopping for all his vices. By the end of that season, he voluntarily entered the NHL's Substance Abuse and Behavioral Health program, trying to get control of his spiraling life. To his credit, he bounced back in 2001. Fleury scored 30 goals, earned another All-Star appearance, and by February, he was 4th in league scoring with 74 points in 62 games. But just as things seemed to be improving, he relapsed and was forced back into the league's rehab program. His season ended abruptly. Despite everything, Wayne Gretzky, then serving as Team Canada's executive director, still believed in him. Gretzky invited Theo to try out for the 2002 Olympic team in Salt Lake City, a move that shocked critics given Theo's highly public struggles. Determined to prove himself, Fleury stayed clean leading up to the games. He later described himself as a dry drunk during that time, physically sober, but still wrestling with the anger and trauma that never left him. Theo earned his spot, and in February 2002, he lived the dream, skating for Team Canada as they captured Olympic gold for the first time in 50 years. For him, it was the absolute pinnacle of his career. He recorded 2 assists in 6 games and was finally able to say he had helped deliver hockey's most coveted prize back to Canada. Theo earned his spot, and in February 2002, he lived the dream, skating for Team Canada as they captured Olympic gold for the first time in 50 years. For him, it was the absolute pinnacle of his career. He recorded 2 assists in 6 games and was finally able to say he had helped deliver hockey's most coveted prize back to Canada. But even at the highest moment of his professional life, his personal struggles continued. While he had stayed clean for the Olympics, he had replaced one vice with another: gambling. He later admitted to losing more than $3 million during this period. Stories circulated of Donald Trump's helicopter picking him up after games, flying him to Atlantic City to gamble all night, and then rushing him back in time for morning practice. Outwardly, he was still an NHL star. In reality, he was unraveling. After the Olympics, things only got worse. Theo's old habits, substance abuse, anger, reckless choices resurfaced, and the Rangers had finally seen enough. When his contract came up, he even offered to play for free just to stay in New York, but GM Glenn Sather shut the door completely, telling Theo's agent he didn't care if Theo cost nothing, his presence was too toxic. Still, his talent meant NHL teams weren't ready to give up on him. In the summer of 2002, he signed a 2-year, $8.5 million deal with the Chicago Blackhawks, reuniting with his former Flames coach Brian Sutter. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but 2 days before the season opener, Theo was suspended by the NHL for once again violating the terms of the substance abuse program. When he finally returned in December, the magic was gone. The speed, the fire, the game-breaking energy, everything that had defined him seemed to have faded. Scouts and coaches quietly admitted that his play wasn't the same. Worse, his behavior off the ice was sending the wrong message to the younger players in Chicago. Theo Fleury, once the heartbeat of the Flames and a Canadian hero, was now a shadow of himself, still trying to fight his battles, but increasingly losing ground. By early 2003, Theo's off-ice struggles were no longer just whispers, they were playing out in public. In January, he was involved in a violent brawl with nightclub bouncers in Columbus, Ohio, leaving him bloodied and humiliated. He later admitted it was one of the lowest points of his life. 2 months later, in March, the Chicago Blackhawks placed him on waivers, but no NHL team was willing to take a chance on him. On the 4th of April 2003, Theo Fleury played what would be his final NHL game. A deflected puck shattered his cheekbone, a play he blamed on his own poor reflexes after showing up hungover. He finished the season with 12 goals and 33 points in 54 games, numbers far below his once elite standard. A few weeks later, sitting on a stationary bike at the Blackhawks facility, Theo recalled thinking, "I hate my life. I hate the game. I can't do this anymore." He walked out of the rink that day and never came back. The Blackhawks never even got an official retirement notice. Days later, the NHL suspended him yet again for violating its substance abuse program. Whether he wanted to keep playing or not, the league had closed its doors on him. What followed was a spiral into his darkest years. Isolated and aimless, Theo retreated to the deserts of New Mexico, where he admits he came dangerously close to ending his own life. For someone who had fought his whole career against bigger opponents, this was the fight he nearly lost. By 2005, desperate for some kind of normalcy, he resurfaced in the unlikeliest of places, the North Peace Hockey League, a Canadian senior circuit. That same year, a friend convinced him to take a bigger leap and head overseas to play for the Belfast Giants of the UK's elite ice hockey league. In Ireland, he was treated like a superstar. Fans lined up to see him, and local media called him the most talented player ever to skate in the UK. Theo didn't disappoint, scoring 22 goals and 74 points in just 34 games while leading Belfast to a league title. He was named the EIHL's Player of the Year, but the real turning point came off the ice. On the 18th of September 2005 in Belfast, Theo finally made the decision to get sober, something he credits to the support of his second wife, Jennifer. For the first time in decades, he began to feel like he had control of his life. After stepping away from professional hockey for several years, Theo shocked the hockey world in 2009 by announcing an NHL comeback attempt at the age of 41. He trained relentlessly, lost weight, and accepted a tryout with the Calgary Flames. In 4 preseason games, he scored 4 points and even netted a memorable shootout winner, bringing fans at the Saddledome to their feet. But on the 28th of September 2009, the Flames released him. The next day, Theo officially retired. As I left the Saddledome on Friday, I knew this part of my life had finally come to an end. I don't have anything left to prove, he said. Though his #4 jersey hasn't been worn since, the Flames have never formally retired it, a point of ongoing debate among fans. That same year, Theo released his autobiography, Playing with Fire. In it, he bravely detailed the horrific abuse he suffered under coach Graham James. The book shocked Canada, became a bestseller, and gave countless survivors of abuse the courage to speak out. Encouraged by his former teammate Sheldon Kennedy, Theo pressed charges. In 2010, Graham James pleaded guilty to abusing Theo and his cousin Todd Holt, receiving an additional prison sentence. Playing with Fire was later adapted into a stage play and a 2012 HBO Canada documentary. Since retiring, Theo's life has been as busy and unpredictable as one of his shifts on the ice. He dabbled in business ventures, appeared on reality television shows, wrote a second book, launched a clothing line, and even tried his hand at country music. But perhaps his most important work has been his advocacy. Alongside ex-Flames forward Colin Patterson, he co-founded the Breaking Free Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping survivors of trauma. He became a sought-after motivational speaker, traveling across Canada to share his story of resilience and recovery. In recent years, however, Theo has also become known for his outspoken and often controversial political views. As a prominent voice for the group Canadians for Truth, he has publicly opposed vaccine mandates and been sharply critical of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. While his stances have made him a polarizing figure, they reflect the same fiery personality that defined his playing days, unafraid to speak his mind, no matter the consequences. Looking back at his career, the numbers speak for themselves. 455 goals, 633 assists, 1,088 points, and 1,840 penalty minutes in 1,084 NHL games. He added 79 points in 77 playoff games, averaging more than a point per game, 26th all-time in NHL history. He was a Stanley Cup champion, an Olympic gold medalist, and a 7-time All-Star. He did all of this despite standing just 5'6" in an era dominated by bigger, stronger players, and in a time when clutch-and-grab defense made scoring harder than ever. Theo Fleury's career was never simple, and neither was his life. He played with fire on the ice, in his personal battles, and in his relentless drive to overcome. For all his scars, both visible and hidden, he remains one of the most unforgettable figures in the history of the game. Despite everything Theo Fleury accomplished on the ice, the Hockey Hall of Fame has never called his name. Statistically, he checks almost every box, over 1,000 points, a Stanley Cup, an Olympic gold medal, and a reputation as one of the most fearless players of his generation. Many argue that if you look strictly at his hockey resume, he should already be in. But hockey isn't always just about numbers. Fleury's life away from the flow rink has been filled with controversy, personal struggles, and outspoken political views that have divided fans and media alike. For some, these off-ice battles may be part of the reason why his case remains stalled. Others believe his story overcoming trauma, fighting addiction, and still performing at an elite level actually strengthens his legacy and deserves recognition. So, the question remains, will Theo Fleury ever get his place among the game's greats in the Hall of Fame? Or will his complicated life outside hockey always keep him on the outside looking in? What do you think, should Theo Fleury be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories from hockey's past. See you in the next one.